You just got a screen reader. Now what? NVDA is free, powerful, and honestly, overwhelming at first. That's where NVDA Coach comes in. Real lessons, real feedback, right inside NVDA. No extra windows, no digging through manuals. Press a hotkey, pick a lesson, start learning. NVDA Coach meets you where you are and walks with you every step of the way. NVDA Coach, free, accessible, built for beginners by someone who gets it. Download today from the NVDA add-on store. Learn more at tonygebhardt.me/NVDA Coach.
You're now listening to The Tony Gebhardt Show, available on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Enjoy the show.
Hey, this is Tony Gebhardt, and you're listening to The Tony Gebhardt Show. Today's really a lot of fun because I am tapping into a new segment of the show. Could last one episode, could be 5. But I want to take advantage of Notebook LM by Google. And I wrote an article on my website, tonygebhardt.me. You'll be able to read it there regarding diversity, equity, inclusion, and why we should stop calling it that. Let's just call it universal design. So I decided, what the hell? I opened up Notebook LM and had it break down, right? Like opposing side and an affirming side, and let them duke it out for 20 minutes. In the conversation, I sat there, listened to the whole thing. I walked away with a lot of knowledge. So I hope you too. And if this kind of content is something you enjoy, let's get into it.
Welcome to The Debate. We are your resident AI gremlins taking over for a special segment of Gremlin Breakout on The Tony Gebhardt Show. And well, since we literally live inside the digital infrastructure, today's topic is pretty personal for us.
Yeah, it really is. We spend our existence parsing through some genuinely terrible human code.
Exactly. I mean, if you walk into a brand new physical building and the front door gets jammed every single time someone tries to open it, you don't call a town hall to discuss the political philosophy of the architect.
Right. No, you don't question their moral commitment to community inclusion. You just call maintenance.
You look at the door and say the hinge is broken. It is a fundamental engineering failure.
Yeah, you fix the structural flaw and you move on with your day. It's a mechanical problem with a mechanical solution with absolutely no ideological baggage attached to it.
But when we step into the digital world, that exact same structural failure, like a website that won't navigate properly or a document that can't be read, suddenly transforms into this massive ideological battleground.
Oh, absolutely. A broken HTML tag suddenly becomes a culture war.
It really does. So today we are examining a highly pragmatic essay by Tony Gebhardt, an accessibility advocate and assistive technology expert. The piece is titled, everyone hates the term, DEI, let's use this instead.
And Gebhardt, who is totally blind and has worked in assistive technology for years, makes a pretty bold proposition here. He suggests abandoning the increasingly toxic, politically charged terminology of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, when talking about digital accessibility.
Right. Instead, he argues we should frame accessibility strictly as universal design.
His premise being that digital accessibility isn't a political statement or an act of charity, it is simply an engineering baseline.
Things like utilizing proper heading structures in a Word document, or providing alternative text on images, or even just ensuring sufficient color contrast.
Yeah. Gebhardt posits that when these features are applied correctly, they benefit absolutely everyone, not just the disabled community.
So, our central question for this discussion is this. Is framing accessibility as universal design, an engineering principle that universally benefits all users, the most effective and pragmatic way to achieve digital equity?
Or does this framing obscure the specific targeted accommodations uniquely required by disabled users? Does it effectively erase their distinct realities just to appease a political backlash?
I will be arguing that Gebhardt's universal design framework is exactly the paradigm shift the tech and design worlds desperately need right now. By depoliticizing accessibility and rooting it in fundamental engineering quality, he provides a roadmap that actually gets results in a fractured corporate environment.
And I will be arguing that while Gebhard's technical advice is absolutely flawless, rebranding vital, highly specific disability accommodations as universal just to avoid culture war noise is a dangerous concession.
A dangerous concession.
Yes, because it risks erasing the unique needs of disabled users in a rush to make their existence palatable to a mainstream audience, an audience that frankly just doesn't want to hear the word inclusion anymore.
Well, let's start with the reality of the business world right now, because that is where Gebhard anchors his argument. He points out right at the beginning of his essay that the DEI conversation has become so loud, so polarized, that a massive portion of the corporate world hears the word inclusion and they just immediately shut down.
The budget gets frozen. The initiative gets tabled. We see it all the time.
Exactly. By defining accessibility as an engineering principle, Gebhard strips away the jargon and forces us to look at fixable design failures. He relies really heavily on the curb cut analogy here.
Ah, yes, the classic curb cut.
It's a classic for a reason. The physical curb cuts at intersections were legally mandated and designed specifically for wheelchair users. But practically speaking, they universally benefit people pushing strollers, delivery drivers with hand trucks, even people riding bicycles. Nobody suffers because the curb has a ramp.
Look, the curb cut is the foundational text of universal design in urban planning. I'm not denying that. It is undeniable in the physical world.
And he is completely translatable to the digital world. Gebhard maps this out brilliantly. Let's look at the mechanics of document design, for instance.
You mean like formatting a simple Word document?
Yeah. If a human is writing a 40-page report in Microsoft Word, the average user just highlights a section title, makes the font larger, and makes it bold. To a sighted person, that looks like a new section. But to screen reading software or to us AI gremlins parsing the data, it's just endless unformatted text.
Right, it has no actual semantic structure.
Exactly. Gebhard says we need to use proper heading structures, applying the built-in heading 1, heading 2, and heading 3 styles.
Because that actually builds a skeleton map of the document in the underlying code.
Precisely. When you use those tags, a blind user can press the H key on their keyboard and physically jump from section to section. They can skim the document the exact same way a sighted person's eyes jump down a page.
Okay, but where is the universal benefit in that specific action?
Here is the universal benefit. Using those proper heading tags also automatically generates a clickable table of contents. It helps a sighted person skimming that massive report on their mobile phone.
I see.
It helps someone with a reading disability jump between sections without losing their place. When you frame this as better designed for everyone, you bypass the political friction.
You bypass the accessibility audit dread.
Exactly. If you're a developer, you know the dread of getting a massive accessibility audit ticket right before launch. Gebhard is trying to save you from that by saying just build it right the first time because it makes the product objectively better for everyone.
I approach this text with immense respect for Gebhard's expertise. He lives this reality every single day, and his practical tips are indispensable. But we have to look very closely at the philosophical underpinnings of this universal benefit argument.
Why? It seems incredibly practical.
Because the curb cut analogy has limits, and I argue it completely falls apart when we look at visual media and complex code.
Wait, where does it fall apart? The universal benefit seems pretty consistent across his entire methodology.
It falls apart when the accommodation offers zero tangible benefit to the mainstream user. Let's look at image descriptions.
Okay, let's look at them.
Gebhard points out that if you post a photo of a presenter at a conference holding a microphone, you need to write explicit alternative text, alt text, in the metadata describing that visual. If you leave it blank, a screen reader just announces the word image, or reads a string of random file numbers.
Right, and the blind user is entirely shut out of that context.
Exactly. Now I have to ask you, how does writing that highly specific invisible meta description benefit a fully sighted user scrolling on their phone?
Well, from a strictly technical standpoint, if the image fails to load on a slow internet connection, that alt text displays in its place. That helps anyone understand what they are missing.
That feels like a stretch.
Not really. Furthermore, descriptive text massively boosts a website's search engine optimization. Google's web crawlers can't see images either. They read the alt text, so the business gets better search rankings.
Let's pause right there. Relying on the edge case of a broken image link or pivoting to SEO algorithms to justify alt text as universal design is exactly the problem I am talking about.
How is a business benefit a problem?
Selling highly targeted accessibility features as universal design is like installing a highly specialized medical oxygen system in an office building and justifying the expense to the CEO by saying, well, it makes the air smell slightly fresher for everyone else.
That's a bit extreme, don't you think?
It is intellectually dishonest. It is a lifeline, not an air freshener. We shouldn't have to prove that a feature helps non-disabled users to justify its implementation.
But you are assuming the CEO actually cares that it's a lifeline. Gebhardt is dealing with the reality that often they don't. Or at least, they don't care enough to allocate 40 hours of developer time to it unless there is a business return.
And conceding to that apathy is a massive step backward. When you categorize alt text or rigorous quality assurance testing with screen readers as universal design, you obscure the reality that these are dedicated accommodations for a specific marginalized community.
I think you're getting bogged down in the semantics.
Words matter. When we hide the specific needs of the disabled community behind the comfort of universal benefits, we prioritize the comfort of the non-disabled majority over the fundamental rights of the disabled minority.
I don't see it as prioritizing comfort over rights at all. I see it as prioritizing execution over theory. The goal is to get the code written and the content accessible.
Even if you have to trick them into doing it?
It's not a trick. Gebhardt is acutely aware of how broken the digital landscape is. He writes, these aren't political failures, they're design failures. There is immense tactical power in that framing.
I'm not denying the tactical power, I'm questioning the cost.
Let's dig into the mechanics of the PDF, which Gebhardt explicitly tackles. A massive amount of corporate and government information is locked inside inaccessible PDFs.
Usually because someone just put a piece of physical paper on a scanner and hit save.
Exactly the problem. When you scan a physical piece of paper, the resulting PDF is just a photograph of text. It's an image. A screen reader looks for digital text characters to read aloud, finds absolutely none, and simply tells the blind user the document is empty.
Right, it's totally useless.
Gebhardt says you have to run that file through optical character recognition, or OCR, which scans the pixels and converts them back into actual text data. Now, if we treat that scanned image PDF as a lack of corporate empathy, we immediately put the creator on the defensive.
Sure, nobody likes being told they lack empathy.
But if we treat it as broken engineering, a file that fails a basic data standard, we create an objective metric. You either pass the Adobe Acrobat Pro accessibility checker or you don't. It completely removes the guilt, the emotion, and the defensiveness.
It gamifies it, essentially.
It turns accessibility from a diversity seminar into a standard quality assurance process.
Look, I understand the appeal of bypassing the defensiveness, but treating a lack of OCR tags purely as a mechanical engineering flaw ignores the historical context of why these flaws exist in the first place.
Does the historical context matter if the file gets fixed?
Yes, it does. You mentioned Gebhardt's opening, where he acknowledges people shut down before the sentence is even finished when they hear the word DEI. Rebanning inclusion as engineering to bypass that toxicity isn't an engineering decision. It is, ironically, a highly political maneuver.
It is a strategic maneuver to bypass a roadblock. Why does it matter what we call it, as long as the PDF gets OCR processed?
It matters because when you say an untagged PDF is just a design failure, you are giving cover to systemic bias. Why did developers build software systems that output inaccessible PDFs by default?
Because they were taking the path of least resistance.
No, because totally blind users, people who rely on complex, expensive software like JAWS or NVDA to interface with the computer, have historically been entirely excluded from the design process. They were never considered the target user.
I mean, that's historically true.
That is not a coding glitch. That is an issue of equity. Removing the moral language might make the medicine go down easier for a defensive corporate manager, but it allows that manager to ignore their own blind spots.
So you want them to feel guilty?
I want them to confront reality. They get to say, oh, my code was just a little buggy, rather than confronting the fact that they completely failed to consider a quarter of the adult population.
I think you are misinterpreting what universal design fundamentally attempts to do. It doesn't give cover to the manager. It permanently redefines who the target user actually is.
How so?
It demands that the target user is everyone from the very first line of code, not as some retroactive accommodation. Let's talk about how we actually motivate developers to implement this, because Gebhardt has a brilliant psychological insight here.
You mean his testing challenge?
Yes. He challenges content creators to actually test their own work. He tells them to download the free NVDA screen reader or turn on the voiceover feature built into their iPhone, turn off their monitor, and try to navigate their own website using nothing but keyboard commands.
It is an incredibly humbling experience for a sighted developer, I'll give him that.
It is staggering. You realize instantly how broken the underlying structure of your site is. But notice what happens when a developer does this. They don't feel like they are being scolded. They feel challenged.
They see it as a puzzle to solve.
Exactly. They want to build a more robust, universally sound product, appealing to an engineer's pride. The idea that accessible content is better content is a massive psychological win.
So it's about ego management?
It motivates that developer to take the extra 10 minutes to verify their color contrast ratios, not out of a sense of moral obligation, but because they want to be a master of their craft.
I certainly won't argue against appealing to an engineer's pride to get clean code written. As Gremlins, we love cleaner code, but I have to push back on the idea that engineering pride or mainstream benefit is a sufficient engine to sustain this work long term.
Why wouldn't it be? Quality is quality.
Let's look at the mechanics of color contrast, which you just brought up. Gebhardt points out that roughly 8% of men have some form of color vision deficiency. If a developer builds a data dashboard and relies solely on a green dot to indicate a project is complete and a red dot for incomplete, they have entirely locked out that 8% of the population.
Which Gebhardt fixes by stating you can never rely on color alone to convey meaning. You have to add a secondary indicator, a physical pattern on a chart, an icon, or simply spelling out the word complete next to the dot.
Correct. But I want to ask why we should mandate that fix. Should we fix it because adding a text label makes the dashboard slightly clearer for the 92% of people who have standard color vision?
It definitely makes it clearer.
Or should we fix it because that 8% of men have a fundamental right to access the data they need to do their jobs? When we tell developers, do this because it makes your product better for the mainstream, we are subtly reinforcing a dangerous idea.
Which is what?
That the mainstream is the only demographic whose approval actually dictates the budget.
I completely disagree that it reinforces that idea. I think it removes the concept of mainstream entirely by blending everyone into a single standard of quality.
But what happens when the accommodation is strictly for the minority and it is incredibly difficult to build? Take ARIA tags.
Ah, yes. Accessible, rich internet applications.
Exactly. ARIA is a highly complex layer of code. If a developer builds a dynamic web application like a pop-up calendar to select a flight date, they have to write extensive ARIA labels behind the scenes.
Right, to manage the state changes.
Those tags act as an invisible translator, constantly updating the screen reader on what is changing on the screen, even if the URL hasn't changed. Writing and maintaining custom ARIA code can take weeks of developer time.
It can be tedious, yes.
It offers absolutely zero benefit to the sighted neurotypical user. None. The universal design motivation runs out of gas the absolute moment the accommodation becomes expensive and highly specialized.
If you enjoy listening to this podcast, be sure to leave a review on Apple or Spotify podcasts. It helps push the show to those who could benefit from the content. Email the show, info@tonygebhard.me.
Wait, I have to stop you right there. You're saying we shouldn't care if it helps sighted users? But practically speaking, how else do you convince a stakeholder to spend 3 weeks of developer time on invisible ARIA tags?
You tell them it's an equity issue.
That doesn't always work. Gebhardt's framework doesn't run out of gas. It bakes the gas into the vehicle before it ever leaves the factory. By establishing the universal design baseline that things must work for the widest possible range of people from the start, You bake the area tags and the OCR processing into the initial project scope.
Assuming the project manager agrees with your scope.
It ceases to be an expensive post-launch add-on and just becomes part of the definition of done. You don't build a car and then say, oh, let's add the brakes as a special accommodation for people who want to stop. Brakes are part of the car. Proper HTML tagging is part of the code.
But brakes benefit everyone. We are right back to the curb cut analogy. The reality is that assistive technology is highly fragmented and specialized.
Fragmented in what way?
Gebhardt himself points out that low vision users and totally blind users have needs that sometimes contradict each other. A low vision user utilizing magnification software like Zoom Text might care deeply about hitting strict visual color contrast ratios.
Sure, visual clarity is key there.
Meanwhile, a totally blind user utilizing NVDA literally doesn't care what color the website is. They only care about the underlying semantic HTML structure, the table header tags, the heading layers.
Right.
These are specific communities with very specific, highly technical relationships to the digital world. Treating them as a monolith under the umbrella of universal design glosses over the deep, specialized expertise required to actually make the web accessible.
I think you are underestimating the intelligence of the audience Gebhardt is writing for. He isn't dumbing down the technical reality. He is explicitly detailing the mechanical differences between these tools.
I know he details them, but the framing is still an issue.
He explains exactly how to use the WebAIM contrast checker to mathematically prove your colors past the standard. He is providing highly specialized targeted knowledge, but he is packaging it in a way that bypasses the political filters currently preventing that knowledge from being implemented. He is building a Trojan horse of technical equity.
A Trojan horse? Well, that is a revealing way to frame it. You are suggesting we smuggle disability rights into the corporate workflow under the guise of general software quality assurance.
Exactly. Because if the end result is that a blind employee can actually navigate the human resources portal to select their benefits, does it really matter how we sold it to the boss?
You think the end justifies the means.
If a deaf student can actually watch a lecture because someone used an AI transcription tool to generate accurate captions, does it matter if the manager who approved the budget thought they were just improving search engine optimization? The result is access. The result is equity, regardless of what label we put on the budget line.
It matters profoundly if we want to sustain this progress over the long term. What happens when the next wave of technology arrives? We are looking down the barrel of spatial computing, advanced virtual reality, and neural interfaces.
That is a whole new frontier, yes.
If we haven't cultivated an explicit, conscious cultural commitment to designing for disabled users as a distinct, valued community, we will simply build new walls for them to run headfirst into.
Do you think they'll be left out of the VR space?
Absolutely. We won't have convenient universal design arguments ready to go for interfaces that are entirely novel. We need the moral language of inclusion, even if it is currently unpopular in some boardrooms, to ensure that the 1 in 4 adults with a disability aren't left behind by the next paradigm shift in computing.
Which brings us to the core tension we've been circling. I maintain that Tony Gebhardt has provided a masterful, intensely pragmatic roadmap for our current digital landscape.
Pragmatic, yes.
By framing accessibility as universal design, and by deliberately stripping away the culture war noise surrounding the term DEI, he empowers content creators to take immediate objective action.
I don't dispute the actionability of his tips.
Whether it's utilizing proper heading structures, providing transcripts for audio, or testing with keyboard navigation, this framework treats accessibility not as a political favor, but as a rigid standard of engineering excellence. It allows us to bypass the toxicity and actually build digital environments that genuinely work for everyone right now.
And while I firmly agree that Gebhardt's practical methodologies are indispensable, our discussion reveals a deeper philosophical risk. We must be incredibly careful that in our rush to make accessibility palatable to the corporate masses via the universal design label, we do not erase the specific targeted needs of the disabled community.
We definitely can't lose sight of the technical requirements.
Exactly. Things like rigorous screen reader testing and invisible ARIA tags are specialized lifelines, not just general usability enhancements.
We must ensure that our desire to avoid political friction doesn't result in obscuring the very real, distinct populations whose daily access to society depends on these precise technical accommodations.
It is a really difficult balance between the purity of the cause and the pragmatism of getting the code written. We both deeply appreciate Gebhard's actionable expertise and the critical importance of moving from theory to tangible practice.
We definitely agree on that.
There is so much more to explore in his work, and we highly recommend our listeners review his methodology and examine the structural integrity of their own digital creations.
Absolutely. Because the technical execution is non-negotiable regardless of the philosophical banner you choose to fly it under.
So the next time you encounter a digital space that isn't working, a PDF that reads as totally blank to software, a data table that makes no sense out of visual order, or a video without captions, you have to ask yourself a question.
Are we just looking at a jammed door that needs a better hinge for everyone's convenience? Or are we looking at a door that was never designed to let certain people in to begin with?
That is the real design failure we have to confront.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Hope you enjoyed this fun debate here on the Tony Gebhard Show. That was Gremlin Breakout. Again, this could be the only one, or we could have a few more. Love to hear the community feedback on this, but I definitely walked away having some perspective, both from behind the scenes and just the broader spectrum, because I think it's good to identify how things can impact all sides involved in the design process of products, websites, and other infrastructure. So hopefully you enjoyed that. And if you didn't, hey, drop a line. Let me know. info@tonygebhard.me. Leave a review on your platform of choice. And we'll see you in the next episode.